I called CPS on my husband's sister and got her arrested, and now my husband is filing for divorce over this. I feel like everyone's gonna say I'm wrong and that family comes first, and I should have stayed out of it because this is exactly what my husband's entire family is saying to me, and now they hate me and my husband is filing for divorce against me. His family told me instead I should have talked to them and have one of them safely drive the kids to grandma's, and I should have helped his sister instead of ruin her life and get her arrested and have her kids taken away from her. So I called CPS on husband's sister, who is 29 years old. She has 4 children and 3 baby daddies. She's unmarried. She's a single mom and is full custody of all her kids. So she's an alcoholic. She usually puts her kids in daycare on random days, even when she's not at work, because she wants to go to the bar and drink and find a guy. She is always jumping in relationship to relationship. So she is always putting her kids in daycare so she can get hammered. So she also drinks and drives with her children in the car. She claims it's not that serious because she's tipsy when she drives, and she is a better drive tipsy than sober. She's not a good person. I hate her. Unrelated, but she is also a backyard breeder. She was starving the Marmor dog because she doesn't have time to take care of stupid dogs when she has a job and kids to take care of. These are her words. The Marmor dog died during labor and more than half the litter didn't make it either. She never took this dog to the vet either, she just sold the pups that did make it. Anyways, this part is a random story, but this is the main reason why I fucking hate my sister-in-law. Anyways, I took a recording of the evidence and I also called the police, gave the license number and other information on where she was headed. The police got her and they checked her alcohol percentage. She's still in the county jail because no one wants to pay $1K for her bail, but my husband's mother and other sister are working on her bail and gonna get her out by tomorrow morning. We don't know when CPS will return the kids. I feel I was doing the right thing, but my husband's family hates me. My husband said this isn't my place. He is leaving me and I'm begging him not to leave me. I feel so vulnerable right now too because I just had a baby 6 months ago. Also, his sister is threatening to beat me up when she gets out of jail. In the aftermath of my decision to involve Child Protective Services and the police in my sister-in-law's situation, the tension within the family reached an unbearable peak. My actions seemed justified in my eyes, considering the risk to the well-being of her 4 children and the blatant disregard for their safety. However, the consequences were dire, leading to the deterioration of my relationship with my husband and a hostile stance from his entire family. The weight of their disapproval hangs heavy on my shoulders as they insist that I should have approached the situation differently. The suggestion that I should have engaged with them and found an alternative solution, such as entrusting the kids to a family member while addressing my sister-in-law's issues, adds to the complexity of the situation. The rift deepens as my husband pursues a divorce, aligning himself with his family's perspective. The stark contrast between my intentions to protect the children and the ensuing marital turmoil leaves me grappling with a sense of isolation. My concerns about my sister-in-law extend beyond her irresponsible parenting, delving into other aspects of her life that have contributed to my disdain for her. The revelation of her involvement in backyard breeding, leading to the suffering and death of animals, only intensifies my aversion towards her. These disturbing details underscore the moral dilemma I faced when deciding to intervene, torn between my duty to protect innocent lives and the alienation that followed. The recording of evidence and my subsequent involvement with the authorities have left a lingering uncertainty about the fate of the children. As my sister-in-law languishes in county jail, my husband's mother and other sister work towards securing her release. The impending return of the children to her custody hangs in the balance, heightening the emotional turmoil surrounding this challenging episode. In my vulnerable state, having recently given birth to a baby, the impending dissolution of my marriage and the looming threat of physical harm from my sister-in-law cast a long shadow over my fragile sense of security. the complexity of family dynamics, personal convictions, and the moral grey areas that emerge in such situations add layers of depth to the narrative, highlighting the challenges faced when trying to navigate through the aftermath of a decision that fractures relationships and tests one's moral compass.
I've been pretending to be dumb at work since I got hired. In the heart of the bustling city, I found myself navigating a new chapter in life, far removed from the hustle and bustle of managing a cafe. I had stumbled upon a revelation, a simple idea that promised a blissful escape from the shackles of diligence and the burdens of overachievement. Every morning, I strolled into the office with a carefree grin, subtly hinting at the mischief lingering in my eyes. I embraced tardiness as a form of self-expression, arriving just late enough to raise a few eyebrows, but not enough to warrant serious concern. Forgetfulness became my ally, a tool to conveniently overlook important meetings and events that once demanded my attention. My desk, once a model of meticulous organization, now reflected the apparent chaos that mirrored my newfound approach to work. Papers were scattered, and office supplies were haphazardly arranged, creating an illusion of perpetual disarray. Colleagues, once accustomed to relying on me for pivotal tasks, observed my transformation with a mixture of bewilderment and amusement. I reveled in seeking guidance on the most mundane of duties, relishing in the air of cluelessness that surrounded me. It was a dance of wit, a theatrical performance where I played the role of the unwitting fool to perfection. The workplace, unsuspecting of my strategic shift, welcomed my quirks with open arms, blissfully unaware of the game I was playing. No longer burdened by the weight of being the go-to person, I floated through the workday with unprecedented ease. The accolades flowed freely, showering me with praise that felt like sweet redemption for days gone by. My salary blossomed to new heights, tangible proof that sometimes, playing it smart was overrated. My colleagues, convinced they were the backbone holding the office together, willingly stepped up to fill the void left by my diminishing responsibilities. Little did they know that the puppet master orchestrating this symphony of simplicity was none other than the once astute cafe manager. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, I marveled at the beauty of my newfound philosophy. I had unlocked a world where I could revel in the joy of mediocrity, unburdened by the expectations that once weighed me down. The cafe I once managed may have lost a diligent overseer, but in its place emerged a master of the art of being just competent enough. So, in the grand tapestry of life, I found solace in the guise of simplicity, dancing on the fine line between ignorance and genius, reveling in the sweet symphony of a life well played. For sometimes, in the pursuit of success, it was the unexpected turns that led to the most delightful destinations.
When I was 16, I took my family pet to the vet, found out he was terminally ill and never told anyone. I'm the eldest of 4 kids in a family of 6, and growing up we had a beautiful albino chinchilla named Dusty. Dusty was an awesome little pet to have as a kid. Very sweet, never bit anyone, loved to cuddle and run around digging tunnels in the bedsheets. He had this really big cage in our guest bedroom that was connected to my room, and every time someone would walk past his cage, he would run to the gate hoping to be taken out. If you opened the gate, he would just hop right into your hand. Anyway, great pet. So about 3 days after I got my driver's license as a 16-year-old, I noticed that one of Dusty's eyes were tearing a little bit, which I hadn't seen happen before. Feeling like a brand new adult with my new driver's license, I decided to take it upon myself to bring him to the vet and see what was up. So, I put him into a brown paper grocery bag with his favorite blanket, made some air holes, stapled it shut, and strapped him into the passenger seat of my family's van. Fast forward maybe a half hour and I'm sitting in the vet's office holding Dusty, feeling like the most responsible adult ever. The vet is an exotic animals vet and takes a look at him, then asks to do an x-ray. So she sedates him a little, does the x-ray, hands him back to me and leaves the room. Adult level 9000 as I sit petting him until he wakes back up. So vet comes back in and sits next to me on the little bench in the checkup room and starts petting him in my lap. She's telling me how wonderful he is and how lucky I am to have such a great little pet, asking me my favorite memories of him, all this. So we are talking, and finally I ask her something like, okay, so how much do chinchilla eye drops cost, because I've got to get going, and she smiles gently, saying something like, I wish eye drops could fix this. She gives me a hug and starts to explain. Dusty was not bred responsibly and had some kind of internal deformity involving the roots of his teeth putting pressure on his eyes and brain. This would eventually cause an early death. I couldn't believe it. I remember starting to cry and putting Dusty back in his grocery bag with his blanket and asking if the vet had a stapler I could use to close it again. I paid cash to the receptionist from my babysitting money and got into my car crying all the way home. When I got home, I sat in the car for a while in the garage trying to gather myself as Dusty chewed on his bag. Looking back, I'm not really sure why, but in the car I decided not to tell my family the news. The vet said Dusty wasn't in pain despite his tearing eye and we wouldn't have to put him down. She didn't know how long exactly he had left, but guessed maybe a year. I guess I figured I didn't want my family to be sad every time they played with him or passed by his cage knowing his time was limited. I wanted the rest of his little life to be normal. Eventually I brought him back in the house and put him in his cage. I went later that day to Petco and bought rodent eye drops as a cover-up and proudly told my family that night how I brought Dusty to the vet to check his eye and lied saying the doctor gave me eye drops and told me eye irritation is common in chinchillas. Dusty lived 3 more years after that, 2 years longer than the vet had expected. He passed away just shy of his 10th birthday. On the morning he passed, I told my dad what had actually happened at the vet. He told me I was so much more of an adult than I knew.
I put my divorced parents who hate each other in the same nursing home. It all started with a letter, a bland envelope that seemed to hold the fate of my family within its paper walls. The confirmation of my application to Shady Pines nursing home arrived, complete with the promise of an ironic name for a place that seemed more like a battleground than a haven for the elderly. Little did I know, this seemingly mundane decision would turn my life into a cocktail of resentment, unexpected alliances, and the kind of dark humor that only dysfunctional families could appreciate. Shady Pines, with its beige walls and flickering fluorescent lights, became the stage for my parents' continued war of words and icy glares. Emma, my fiery red-headed mother, and Richard, my perpetually disgruntled father, were suddenly thrust together in a space that felt like a cruel cosmic joke. The staff, well acquainted with the drama that unfolded within their walls, watched with a certain detached amusement. As the days dragged on, our shared room became a silent battlefield where the ghosts of their failed marriage danced in the shadows. The only thing more palpable than the disdain between them was the stifling air of unresolved tension. Yet, amid the chaos, something unexpected began to emerge. Perhaps it was the collective distaste for the institutionalized meals or the shared eye rolls at the absurdity of daily activities, but a strange camaraderie started to form. The lines between animosity and familiarity blurred, creating a toxic yet strangely magnetic connection. Their exchanges went beyond bitter arguments, they became a twisted form of communication, a language only they could understand. The tipping point arrived during a raucous game of poker in the common room. Emma and Richard, fueled by a mixture of bitterness and a shared desire to outwit each other, joined forces against the unsuspecting residents. The night ended in chaos, but for the first time in years, they laughed together, not out of love, but out of a dark understanding. And so, Shady Pines became the backdrop for their toxic truce. The staff rolled their eyes at the dysfunctional dynamic, while the other residents secretly placed bets on the longevity of their unholy alliance. It was a morbid form of entertainment in a place that seemed to thrive on the absurdity of aging. As I observed the strange dance of my parents, I couldn't help but marvel at the dark humor of life. Shady Pines, with its dreary hallways and faded wallpaper, had become the twisted theater where my parents' bitter saga played out. The story wasn't one of redemption or reconciliation, but rather a chaotic comedy of errors set against the backdrop of a nursing home named with cruel irony. And so, the trio of resentment persisted in their reluctant cohabitation, turning Shady Pines into a darkly humorous chapter in the saga of a family that refused to go quietly into the night. Life may have its strange twists, but in the shadows of Shady Pines, my parents found a peculiar form of unity in their shared disdain for each other.
I am responsible for the deaths of several people. Around 4 years ago, I was a vendor on the darknet. It was a relatively short-lived thing. I was just doing it because I was too lazy to get a job and at the time didn't want to settle for the 9 to 5 thing. I wanted to start my own business and use the drug money as a start-up. I had been using myself for years, along with that I met lots of people into the dealing scene, and eventually started dealing myself. I have a lot of anxiety though, so I hated meeting up with people in parking lots, and I definitely didn't want anyone to know where I lived. That's when I read about the Silk Road and Ross Ulbricht being caught. Got obsessed with the idea of it, got obsessed with learning OPSEC, all with the goal of eventually using my connections to start up my store. Well, after a couple of months I did. I started my store with 3 drugs, ketamine, meth, and some outdoor weed my buddy was getting for super cheap. All was going good for a few months, had a couple thousand get stolen in an exit scam, but I had about $25,000 saved at that point, so it didn't ruin my life like a few vendors I knew of. Eventually, I met a local connect that came into town only once a week, but had anything I wanted. Mescaline, LSD, mushrooms, PCP, and even fentanyl. At the time, people weren't really cutting heroin with fentanyl. I mean, I'm sure people did plenty, but it was not nearly as commonplace now. People just did fentanyl. And still do. I put all my addresses into an Excel spreadsheet along with their name, zip code, order, along with the amount. At the time, I was selling some super white powdered mescaline. The fentanyl was also a white powder. Very similar consistency. Long story short, my Excel messed up, or I messed up, and about 7 people's mescaline orders were filled in as fentanyl orders. They all went out, I didn't notice and kept doing my thing for a few days. After about 5 days, someone contacted me and told me their friend died from my mescaline. I immediately called B.S. and went to check my order log and scale up how much I had of my mescaline left. Well, I had about 11 grams more than I should have. I still don't know how it could have happened. I wasn't a user, but I was definitely high off dabs. I went to check my order log on the market to see if anyone had finalized on their purchase, and a couple of them were, but none from a specific day. Including the person that messaged me. No one that had purchased mescaline that day had finalized their orders. The market I was on also had a feature to see the user's last activity, and none of them had logged in at least 3 days. Most 2 days. I immediately deactivated my vendor account. I didn't even need confirmation, I knew what happened. I knew I just killed several people. I sold the rest of my drugs, converted my Bitcoin to cash, and moved away. Didn't speak to anyone for weeks. Found a job in a restaurant, living in a city I always wanted to. I haven't touched drugs since that day. I haven't had anything to do with that life since then. I still think about them. Every night. I saved their names and Googled them a few days later. I was able to find info on 4 customers that definitely died. 1 customer shared it with a friend. They both died. I don't know why I'm even posting this, mainly because I have no one to tell, and even if I did, I don't think I could. I spend my days sober. Clocking into work. Clocking out of work. Coming home. Playing video games. I'm a complete recluse. People I used to know have distanced themselves immensely, and I know it's because I'm a shell of my former self. I can't help it. Could I even tell a therapist about this? I don't feel like I deserve to be alive. Am I really living anyway? I don't even know anymore. Maybe this will help me feel better.